At my departure lunch, Gavin raised his champagne flute and announced, "Technology is the future." He went on, his eyes never meeting his glossy grin. "Northrise apparel will be positioned to dominate the market for decades to come with our new automated systems and AI integration." With that practiced earnestness they teach in executive coaching courses, he turned to face me. "Let's thank Vita for bringing us to this point." There was the customary clapping in the meeting room. I thanked them, grinned, and nodded while holding onto my little black notepad, which was the sole personal belonging I had retrieved from my workplace after yesterday's packing of 25 years worth of memories into 3 cardboard boxes. Vita Lewis is my name. I have served as the foundation of Northrise Apparel's whole data infrastructure in Sacramento for 25 years. When I first started, I was building code and connecting actual servers, which served as the framework for the future billion-dollar business. Back then, I wasn't referred to as a data architect. I was only the computer woman who managed to get everything to function. With the eager tone of someone who had only joined the firm 14 months prior, Gavin went on, "Vita has been with us since the beginning. From a modest regional distributor to the current market leader, she has witnessed our growth. We hope she has a wonderful retirement." Retirement. It was a painful word. I hadn't decided to go, and I was just 59. 3 weeks prior, I had been presented with the decision as a fait accompli. Leaning back in his ergonomic chair, Gavin had stated, "The Nexus system will streamline our operations." This was a reference to the new AI management system they had acquired for what I subsequently found out was $17 million. "Unfortunately, your position is no longer needed with the new infrastructure." Around me, now former coworkers avoided eye contact because they understood the true purpose of this goodbye lunch, the ceremonial removal of an outdated component. Because I didn't suit the slick new look of Silicon Valley-inspired corporate modernity, I was being thrown out after decades of developing the nervous system of their empire, including establishing their inventory monitoring, constructing their customer database, and programming their shipment operations. In my hand, I could feel the weight of my notepad. It had 25 years of institutional expertise, including manual override codes, emergency backdoor patches, and the quirks of our specially designed system that were not mentioned in any instruction manual. Information that was only kept in my mind and on these pages, not on any server or cloud. To Vita and to Northrise Apparel's future, Gavin said in closing. In response, I lifted my glass, a rehearsed grin concealing my thoughts. They had no idea how complex their future would soon become. In 1998, while the business was still known as West Coast Threads and had 23 workers working out of a converted warehouse, I purchased my home in Midtown Sacramento. Now that Northrise Apparel employed more than 7,000 people nationwide, my little 2-bedroom craftsman had grown in value to the point that, if I so desired, I could sell it and live well in retirement. However, I had no intention of retiring. The evening after my farewell lunch, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset and thinking back on how I'd become the company's foundation without anyone fully realizing it. When Thomas Green first hired me, fresh out of a computer science program where I was one of 4 women in my class, he valued my methodical approach. "You think of things the rest of us don't," he'd said. "I need someone who sees the big picture." And I had. As West Coast Threads became Green Apparel and finally Northrise, I designed systems that anticipated our growth. I built redundancies, created emergency protocols, standardized our data collection. When we acquired smaller companies, I integrated their systems with ours, preserving what worked while upgrading what didn't. Everything changed when Thomas retired 3 years ago. The board brought in Gavin Pard, 38 years old, with an MBA from Wharton and a resume full of tech startups, but no experience in apparel manufacturing or distribution. His first all-hands meeting set the tone. We need to disrupt ourselves before someone else disrupts us. Over the next year, consultants from Trading came and went, using phrases like digital transformation and AI-first paradigm. They interviewed me extensively, taking notes on how our systems functioned, what databases contained which information, how our proprietary software managed inventory across 5 distribution centers. I should have seen it coming, but loyalty had made me naive. The doorbell rang, jolting me from my thoughts. Through the peephole, I saw Eleanor from HR holding a basket. "Just wanted to check on you," she said when I opened the door. "The transition team realized we never got your authentication codes for the backup systems." The transition team, being the 320-somethings tasked with deconstructing my life's work. "Everything's in the handover documents," I replied coolly. "The master list should have all the access protocols." Eleanor's smile faltered. "There seems to be some confusion about the legacy systems, particularly the warehouse automation interfaces." Of course there was. Those interfaces were custom-built, modified over years to work with our specific needs. Nothing about them was standard. "I'm sure they'll figure it out," I said, accepting the gift basket but not inviting her in. The Nexus system is the future, after all. The first signs of trouble came a week after my departure. My former colleague Jerome texted me on a Tuesday afternoon. "Systems glitching. New team can't figure out why the inventory won't reconcile with the shipping manifests." I didn't respond. The next day, Bethany from accounting called. "Vita, we're having some issues with the quarterly reporting module. The numbers aren't matching what we're seeing in sales." "I'm sure the transition team can handle it," I replied. "The Nexus system is supposed to be state-of-the-art. But it's still pulling from your database architecture," she pressed. "Nobody understands the connections like you do." I felt a twinge of sympathy for Bethany, who had always been kind to me. But I remained firm. "I've moved on, Bethany. My consulting schedule is already full." This wasn't a lie. The day after my severance package had cleared, I'd received a call from Philip Donovan, co-founder of Donovan and Mills Logistics. They were Northrise's biggest competitor in the West Coast apparel distribution space, and they wanted to meet. "Just a consultation," Philip had said. "We've admired your work for years." The office of Donovan and Mills occupied the 12th floor of a glass tower downtown, with a view of the state capitol. It was sleeker than Northrise's converted industrial campus, filled with natural light and modern furniture. Philip met me in the lobby himself, a courtesy Gavin had never extended to anyone below VP level. "Miss Lewis," he said, shaking my hand. "Thank you for coming. We're excited to hear your thoughts on our data." Infrastructure. The meeting lasted 3 hours. I was introduced to their tech team, shown their systems, asked my opinions on their processes. They listened carefully, took notes, asked intelligent questions. "We've been trying to solve our multi-location inventory synchronization for months," their lead developer admitted. "Our current system can't handle the complexity." The problem was immediately clear to me. I'd solved it for Northrise 15 years ago. At the end of the meeting, Philip walked me to the elevator. "We'd like to bring you on as a consultant," he said. 3 days a week. Your own team. Complete autonomy on how you approach the rebuild. The offer was double my previous salary. "I'll need to think about it," I said, though my mind was already made up. When I got home, there were 3 missed calls from Northrise, 1 from Eleanor, 1 from the IT department, and 1 from Gavin himself. I ignored them all. That night, I opened my black notebook and began transcribing its contents into a password-protected document on my personal laptop. Emergency workarounds, server peculiarities, the architectural quirks of a system built over decades rather than designed all at once. Knowledge that wasn't documented anywhere else. The next morning, I called Philip and accepted his offer. That afternoon, Jerome texted again. "Complete system failure. Nothing's talking to anything. CEO is losing his mind." I closed my phone without replying and began packing for my first day at Donovan and Mills. I was deep into my 3rd week at Donovan and Mills when the storm truly broke. I'd been given a corner office overlooking the American River and a team of 5 developers who actually listened when I talked about database architecture. We were making rapid progress on rebuilding their inventory management system, and I felt more valued in those 3 weeks than I had in my last 3 years at Northrise. My phone buzzed with a text from Jerome. They're calling it the Black Thursday crash. Nothing's working. Orders lost. Inventory frozen. Customer portal down. Gavin's looking for someone to blame. I didn't respond, but I did pull up the local business news on my computer. There it was, a headline on the Sacramento Business Journal website. Northrise Apparel faces major system outage. Stock drops 8% on fulfillment concerns. The article described how Northrise's much-touted new AI system had failed spectacularly, leaving customers unable to place orders and warehouses unable to ship existing ones. The company had issued a statement about temporary technical difficulties, but sources inside the company, Jerome, I suspected, described a complete system collapse. My office phone rang. Philip Donovan's name appeared on the caller ID. I assume you've seen the news about your former employer, he said when I answered. Just reading it now, I replied. Any insights you'd care to share? His tone was carefully neutral. I considered my response. Their new system was implemented without adequate testing or understanding of the existing architecture. It was inevitable. I see. Philip paused. We've received an interesting call from a Thomas Green. Apparently, he still sits on Northrise's board, and he suggested we might have recently acquired some valuable expertise that could help resolve their situation. My heart skipped. Thomas had been my champion for decades, but I never expected him to reach out like this. What did you tell him? I asked. That we're quite happy with our recent personnel decisions and have no interest in loaning out our valuable consultants. I smiled despite myself. Thank you, though I admit to some curiosity, he continued. Just how bad is their situation? I sighed, weighing my professional ethics against my lingering resentment. If they tried to integrate Nexus without properly migrating the manufacturing execution system I designed, they've likely corrupted their entire database. Every order, inventory record, and shipping manifest from the last 3 months could be affected. And recovery? Possible, but not with their current team. They don't understand how the legacy systems interact with the newer components. We were interrupted by my assistant, who appeared at my door with an urgent expression. Miss Lewis, there's a Gavin Pard online too. He's called 3 times in the last hour. I thanked her but made no move toward the phone. Philip raised an eyebrow. Aren't you going to take that? I don't work for Northrise anymore, I replied simply. He nodded slowly, a small smile forming. No, you certainly don't. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. We have that strategy meeting at 3. I'd be interested in your thoughts on expanding our direct-to-consumer channels. After he left, I sat staring at the blinking light on my phone for a long moment before turning back to my work. By that evening, my email contained increasingly desperate messages from various Northrise executives. The most revealing came from Eleanor. The transition team has admitted they don't understand how to restore from your backup protocols. Gavin is talking about bringing in external consultants at $30,000 a day. Please call me. I closed my laptop and went home, sleeping better than I had in years. The next morning brought news that Northrise's stock had fallen another 6%. A financial analyst on the local business report speculated that extended fulfillment issue could cost the company upwards of $50 million if not resolved quickly, with long-term damage to customer relationships that could be incalculable. When I arrived at Donovan and Mills, I found an elaborate fruit basket on my desk with a note from Philip. Thank you for your loyalty. Your insights yesterday helped us secure the Wilson account for .2 Northern Annual. The Wilson Group had been one of Northrise's oldest clients. I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction before getting back to work. Around noon, my desk phone rang again. The receptionist sounded apologetic. Ms. Lewis, there's a Gavin Pard in the lobby insisting on seeing you. He doesn't have an appointment. I took a deep breath. Tell him I'm in meetings all day. He says he'll wait. After consulting with Philip, who seemed amused by the situation, I agreed to a 15-minute meeting in one of the first-floor conference rooms, neutral territory. Gavin looked terrible. His usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, with dark circles under his eyes and a coffee stain on his shirt. "Vida," he said, reaching to shake my hand. I nodded but didn't reciprocate. "Thank you for seeing me. What can I do for you, Gavin?" I kept my tone professional, betraying none of the satisfaction I felt seeing him so undone. "We need your help," he said simply. "The Nexus integration has encountered some complications. I believe catastrophic failure is the term the business papers are using." He winced. "The coverage has been unfortunate, but we believe with your expertise, we can resolve the issues quickly. The board has authorized me to offer you a 6-month consulting contract. Very generous terms. I have a position here. We'll double whatever they're paying you." He said quickly, then, seeing my expression, "Triple it." I leaned back, studying him. "You fired me, Gavin. You called my expertise obsolete. You said, what was it, that technology is the future and my methods were holding the company back." He had the decency to look embarrassed. "That was a mistake. We all make mistakes, some more costly than others. Vida, please. We're losing millions every day. The warehouses can't ship, customer service can't access order histories. The Nexus team says the core database is corrupted beyond recognition." I thought of all the warnings I'd given during the transition, the documentation I'd provided that had been dismissed as unnecessarily complex, the training sessions no one had time to attend. "No," I said simply. "What?" "No. I don't work for Northrise anymore. I have commitments here. But I'm sure your Nexus experts will figure it out eventually." Gavin's desperation turned to anger. "You know exactly what happened to our systems. You probably built in these failures." I stood up, my own anger flaring. "I dedicated 25 years to building robust, reliable systems that kept your company running without fail. If they're failing now, it's because you dismantled them without understanding how they worked. We'll sue," he threatened. "For sabotage." "For what? For taking another job after being fired? For not documenting every single aspect of systems I built over 25 years? Sue me for not answering phone calls from a company that discarded me." I gathered my papers. "I believe our 15 minutes are up." As I walked out, I turned back briefly. "By the way, there's a complete recovery protocol in the Emergency Procedures Manual, Volume 3, Section 8. I updated it every quarter for 20 years. But of course, that would require actually reading the documentation." I left him there, mouth slightly open, and returned to my new office where I was building something better. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from Northrise's legal department requesting all documentation, notes, and intellectual property related to my former position. It was followed by a personal note from Thomas Green. "Vida, call me. We need to talk. The board is in chaos." I decided to respond to Thomas out of respect for our history. He answered on the first ring. "This is a mess," he said without preamble. "Gavin has the board convinced you sabotaged the system." "That's absurd," I replied. "I built those systems to withstand anything. They were working perfectly when I left." "I know that," Thomas sighed. "But they need someone to blame. The Nexus implementation has been a disaster. They've lost millions in orders, and their main backup was corrupted during the migration." "There's a tertiary backup," I said, "on the secure server in Building C. It runs independently from the main system and archives everything weekly." There was a pause. Building C was decommissioned last month. Cost-cutting measure. I closed my eyes, imagining the old server room with its carefully maintained equipment now empty. "Of course it was," I muttered. "Vida," Thomas's voice softened. "I know you were treated poorly, but there are 7,000 employees whose livelihoods depend on Northrise. Not all of them were part of Gavin's decisions." It was a fair point, and one that had been weighing on me. My grievance was with the executive team, not with the warehouse workers or customer service representatives who were probably dealing with chaos. "I can't come back, Thomas. I've made commitments here. I understand. But perhaps there's a middle way. What if you provided consultation remotely? Just enough guidance to get the critical systems back online? The board would ensure you're well compensated, and Gavin would have no direct contact with you. I considered his proposal. I'll think about it. That evening, I discussed the situation with Philip, who surprised me with his response. Help them, he said. Under the right conditions. You want me to help our biggest competitor? He smiled. I want you to negotiate terms that benefit us both. If you can get their systems running again while securing favorable terms for Donovan and Mills, that's a win-win. The next day, I called Thomas with my conditions. I would provide remote consultation only, working exclusively through their technical team. I would require a substantial consulting fee paid in advance, and most importantly, Northrise would need to sign a partnership agreement with Donovan and Mills, giving us preferred status for West Coast distribution. That's essentially asking us to collaborate with our competitor, Thomas said. It's asking you to acknowledge reality. I countered. Northrise's distribution network is in shambles. You need reliable partners until you're back on your feet. Donovan and Mills can handle the overflow at fair rates, and I can help restore your systems. Everyone wins. Thomas took my terms to the board, who spent 8 hours in emergency session before agreeing. Gavin was reportedly furious, but overruled. The next week was intense. Working remotely through video conferences, I guided Northrise's technical team through the painstaking process of recovering their data and rebuilding critical systems. I didn't give them everything, just enough to restore basic functionality and prevent further losses. Philip was delighted with the partnership agreement, which gave us access to clients we'd been pursuing for years. Northrise's stock stabilized, and the crisis coverage in the business press began to fade. Through it all, I maintained my distance from Gavin, speaking only with the technical team and Thomas. But I heard through Jerome that Gavin's position was precarious, with several board members openly questioning his leadership. It wasn't revenge exactly. It was something more satisfying, vindication. 6 weeks after what the tech team had begun calling the VA protocols salvaged Northrise's systems, I received an unexpected email from Thomas Green. The subject line read simply, Board Meeting Results. Gavin Pard had been removed as CEO. The board had voted 10-2 for his immediate replacement. The Nexus failure cost us $142 million in lost orders, damaged customer relationships, and emergency consultants, Thomas wrote. His position became untenable when the quarterly reports showed the extent of the damage. I thought you should hear it from me first. I sat back in my chair, letting the news sink in. I hadn't actively worked for Gavin's downfall, but I couldn't pretend to feel sorry about it. His arrogance had nearly destroyed a company that thousands of people depended on for their livelihoods. Later that day, Philip stopped by my office. I hear Northrise is looking for a new CEO, he said with a knowing smile. So I've heard. They could do worse than to bring Thomas back temporarily. I gave a nod. He understands the business in a way Gavin never did. The Wilson account was so impressed with our handling of their overflow that they've asked about making the arrangement permanent, Philip said, referring to his grasp of the business. That would be a straight purchase of a $12 million yearly contract from Northrise. I watched. Philip gave a shrug. Reality is reality. Speaking of business, our 5-year strategic plan will be discussed at tomorrow's executive committee meeting. Please share your ideas for our data architecture with me. My vision. In 2 months, you've totally changed our systems. The committee wants to know what you've created and where you envision it heading, Vita. Your efforts are worthy of praise. I looked out my window at the distant Sacramento skyline as he walked away. The Northrise complex was barely visible to me. The main building still had its emblem lighted. On the inside, however, everything was different. Although the business would go on, it would never be the same. I wouldn't either. I was creating something on my terms with people who appreciated my contributions for the first time in decades. I went to the ribbon-cutting event for the new technology center at Donovan and Mills 3 months later. The inscription next to the entryway said, Vita Lewis Technology Center, where innovation meets experience, and it bore my name. After my system update improved their distribution network's efficiency by 38%, Philip insisted on naming it after me. In addition to housing a larger development team, the center would provide technical workers from around the organization with training facilities. We didn't just hire a consultant, according to Philip's speech. We gained a visionary who understood that technology should serve people, not replace them. I reflected on how things had gone differently than I had anticipated when I left Northrise as I stood next to him for the ceremonial photo. I had envisioned a fresh start, not exactly retaliation. However, my achievement had turned into a kind of validation that was stronger than any intentional revenge. Following the event, local lawmakers and business leaders joined the reception. I was approached by a woman I had never seen before. Diane Torres from the Governor's Office of Business Development here, Miss Lewis. Amazing things have been said about your work. We discussed data systems and their effects on local companies for about 30 minutes. She gave me her card at the conclusion of our talk. A task group on state agency technological infrastructure is being formed. People with perspective and experience are what we need. Would you be open to being an advisor? A man half my age had declared me obsolete 6 months prior. I was now being asked to contribute to the development of statewide technology policy. I took her card and said, I'd be honored. Jerome texted me as the event was coming to an end. New CEO announced. Who would you guess? In order to guide Northrise through its revival, Thomas Green was coming out of retirement. Grinning, I put my phone aside without answering. I had closed that chapter of my life. Now I was concentrating on creating something fresh. I came to the realization that the best kind of retaliation wasn't destruction at all as I turned to face the center that bore my name and was populated with individuals who appreciated my achievements. It has to do with creation.